Now we're
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the Smart Politics Way. Today, we are going to be talking about um, a totally different question, which is why do facts not work in our conversations with people we disagree with? And I know for a lot of people, we get into political dialogues and it feels like we're hitting up against a wall. And a lot of us have been taught, whether in school or in our professional life, that what we do if we want to persuade someone is that we come up with a really strong thesis and we come up with a bunch of evidence to support that. And then we present our thesis, we present the evidence, and then the other person presents why they think that evidence is wrong. And then we come up with a rebuttal. And this is supposed to be like a very effective way of persuading someone. And today we're going to talk about why, when we actually do that, it really doesn't seem to work.
Yeah. By the way, I'm Locke Petersheim. We didn't introduce ourselves.
Not yet. We're just diving right in today.
My name is Locke Petersheim. I'm the content manager for Smart Politics. And that's Dr. Karen Tamaris, the founder of Smart Politics. One of the things I always think about, because I'm a pop culture guy, is that you always approach it from like debate club. You were in debate club, and I was not.
I was in debate club.
But we all ingest courtroom shows. I always think about The West Wing. The West Wing was a wonderful show. We all loved it, but it corrupted our minds in some ways, that we think that, like, if you have a really powerful walk and talk down a hallway and you make this really strong argument with really strong facts backing it up, that'll convince somebody, and someone will change their mind. And a lot of it just comes from the nature of pop culture, which is everything has to be resolved in 50 minutes. And so everything is shorthanded. And I think we've kind of ingested that shorthand into our psyches, where we think, oh, I just need to give the right speech in the right way with the right facts, and that everything will be resolved by the 55-minute mark.
Right. But what we've actually found, right, is that when we get into these conversations, whether it be about, what's going on with the environment, whether it's about January 6th, whether it's about QAnon, vaccines, the vast number of Trump's crimes, his corruption, the actual response is just kind of stonewalling and sometimes anger. Sometimes people seem to dig their heels in. Um, but regardless of what it is, our facts don't seem to make a difference, and that leads to a tremendous amount of frustration and angst. It causes a lot of times us to feel like maybe they are just kind of stupid. Maybe they don't want to hear the facts. Maybe they have no interest in doing the right thing. Maybe they're just intentionally making bad decisions. They don't care about the good of the nation. So today we're really going to dig into what's actually going on here. And maybe a better way to think about what's going on and a better way to approach this.
Yeah, I always say also we have to kind of check our bubble biases as we go into this. I always tell a story about when I started teaching high school back in the early 90s. I went in assuming that every student I was teaching out of the 100 students a day was going to be like I was when I was 15 years old. And the things that worked for me and that got me interested, or controlled my discipline, that those would work for everybody else. And we think the same thing too. We think, well, I love when someone gives me a stack of binders to read. I love when someone gives me an article to read. That may or may not be the majority of the people you're talking to. They don't respond that way. So we go into it thinking, well, these are the things that convinced me to change my mind or to believe in this thing. If I just do repeat that to this other person, it will automatically change their mind. So we get caught up on our own biases about what we're going to be
This
doing.
is true, but I will also add, Locke, that we often are not good historians about ourselves. We often aren't always clear about why we believe what we believe. Like, the reality of how we came to our beliefs might actually be very different than the rational stories we tell ourselves. It might have a lot more to do, for example, with, who our parents were, or, the neighborhood we grew up in, or the university we went
Mhm.
to, or who our friends were. And those might be the most important factors in the political beliefs we end up with, even though we tell ourselves that actually it was all because of the rational decisions we made and the facts we reviewed.
Well, and also to follow up on what I was saying earlier about pop culture and stuff, we've edited into a narrative in our head that is a tight, compact narrative. Like, oh, I used to be like this, and then someone told me something, and then I changed. And that was 20 years ago. And we forget that no, that was actually like a year-long process of me kind of, mulling over things and art and struggling with things. So we edit our memories into a much more concise narrative, story that we tell ourselves.
Very good. So before we dive in any further, let's do a quick recap of who we are, what this series is, and why we're here. As Locke said, I'm Dr. Karen Tamarius. I'm a political psychiatrist. What that means is I'm trained in both political science with an emphasis in political psychology. Political psychology is a study of how people make their decisions in politics, how they decide how to behave, why they behave the way they do. And then I'm also a medical doctor and in specifically in the field of psychiatry, which means that I know a lot about psychotherapy and how to talk with people, how to communicate in a way that helps them lower their defenses. So, one of the things that I really try to do as a political psychiatrist is to bring psychotherapy skills into the political realm so we can communicate in ways that help people lower their defenses so we can hear each other better. Locke, would you like to say a tiny bit more about you?
There's not my name is Locke Pierce. I'm the content manager. I'm in Iowa today. I'll be in Chicago next week. I bounce back and forth between Iowa and Chicago. There's a term for this. It's a trend in films lately of having what they call the late credit. So the opening credit comes like 15 minutes into the movie instead of at the beginning. That's what we just did. We just did like 10 minutes of content and then suddenly, bam, here's the credits. So you ready to go? Ready to dive into your
Well,
agenda?
let's just say so. And Smart Politics is an organization dedicated specifically to helping progressives communicate more persuasively, more productively with people we disagree with. And often that is Republicans. Sometimes it is people at the very far end of the spectrum. It could be Trump voters. It could be white nationalists. It could be, um, but at the same time, it could be someone who's really right in the middle of the political spectrum, who's really maybe someone who's completely apolitical and has never voted in their lives. It's also here to help you with people, um, even who you consider like really in your own community, because sometimes the people who make us most angry are our friends. Because when your friend is disagreeing with you and you expect them to agree with you, that can be really upsetting. It can feel like a major betrayal. So we also help with how do you communicate when your best leftist friend has a different position than you on a trans issue. And so no matter what problem you're dealing with in communicating as a progressive on these issues, we're here to help.
Yeah, and I always say, there's some folks who come to us who have they've had experience. They've had specific experiences with relatives. They've had a conversation with an uncle or a brother or a son or a daughter, and they've had it go badly. A lot of folks, especially online, are more like they haven't necessarily had these conversations, but they have an idea in their head of who they're talking to. And I always hammer on this point that when Karen said, white nationalists, neo-Nazis at the far end. Most of the time, most of the people you talk to are not gonna be that. They're gonna be much more kind of apathetic. You're gonna find they sort of like, "Well, yeah, I voted for Trump," and they give you a reason. It's just a it seems like a pretty shallow throwaway reason to you, someone, steeped in politics. Well, I don't wanna scare people off. Sometimes I think you say, "Oh, you could talk to Klan members, you could talk to white nationalists," and they're like, "Oh god," I those people. It's not who you're gonna be talking to most of the time. It's gonna be someone who's just like, "Oh, yeah, I voted for Trump because he's kind of funny." And that may be more frustrating for you than than talking to a white nationalist in some ways. So I'm just saying that it's a wide spectrum, and as Karen said, a lot of the folks are just kind of floating in the middle. Especially, I always say, right now, with the combination of the elections coming up in the fall and just the general, disencouragement, disconnection that a lot of Trump voters are having right now. A lot of them are just sort of backing away from pop. They're just kind of like, look, this didn't go the way I thought it would. Trump's he would be, and they're like, okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to, you know, go back to my hobbit hole and not worry about this stuff. So people are all over the place.
Right. And this is probably a good time to mention that when we're talking about having these conversations across differences, we are always talking about peer-to-peer conversations. We are not talking about conversations between people with significant power imbalances. So we are not talking about someone from a historically marginalized community having a conversation with someone who poses a major threat to them. Those conversations should be had by somebody who has a lot more power.
Yeah, privilege is a issue.
Privilege is really important. It's
Yeah, and it's
really
our
important
superpower.
factor in these conversations.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
So back
so
to the question at hand.
yeah, so you were brought up in a debate environment. I ran
Yeah,
as far as
yeah,
possible. Um,
hugely. So
your husband is
yes,
an attorney.
my husband
So
is an attorney. I met my husband through high school debate. Like that is how
so
how
my point is
deep
we always
in
talk
high
about
school debate I am.
you don't want to be a what is it, a politician, a preacher, or a prosecutor in these
Yeah,
conversations.
right.
So you kind of came at it from the debate point of view. What
And I
so
had to really unlearn that. Like,
Well, so what went wrong? What goes wrong with and I see this all the time online, especially with folks who follow us. They're like, "Why can't I just" they even ask us questions in a kind of debate form. So
yeah.
what's wrong with debating? We've all been told like, "Oh, that's how you convince people is you debate them."
Right. I mean, even like the first time you're taught to write the 5 paragraph essay, this is a high
I taught
school
it.
English teacher, right?
I can't tell you what it
Come
is
up
right
with the
now.
thesis, you come up with the evidence, you support it, you write your conclusion, right? It's
Intro,
all
3
in.
supporting points,
Yeah,
conclusion, 5 points
it's
speech.
an argument, and that is how we are taught is the proper way to communicate. Um, and it is a great way to communicate. It is, but it is very context specific, and that is what we are not taught. We are not taught that it is contingent. And so, what I'm going to teach you today is the contingency. So here's the contingency. Debate is really great for resolving differences in a situation where there is an impartial judge or jury. Okay. So, in a situation where you have someone who is listening and making a decision based on the evidence, who has no prior disposition about it, who is capable of listening with an open mind because they haven't already made up their mind in any significant way, then they are able to hear that evidence, take it in, weigh it, and come to a reasoned conclusion, right? So that's why we have judges and juries. That is exactly how a courtroom functions. And it works. It is a remarkably robust and powerful system. Now, when you are in a conversation with someone, particularly a political conversation with someone, what is going on is not that you are talking with someone who is an impartial judge or jury. You are talking with someone who already has a very strong prior opinion about the issue at hand. Um, and not only are they not an impartial judge or jury, it's more like you're actually having a conversation with the other prosecutor or defense attorney, right? So it's more like, let's imagine you were in that courtroom, and instead of speaking to the judge or jury, you're the prosecutor and you're trying to convince the defendant to plead guilty. You're the prosecutor. You're going up to the defendant and saying you're guilty. Just admit it. You're guilty, right? The defendant is not going to admit that. It doesn't work. Like, we've seen that on cross-examination. It doesn't happen. Um, and that's essentially what's transpiring in a conversation. The defendant would become very defensive by nature, and they're not going to give you any ground. The prosecutor's just gonna maintain their position that the defendant did wrong things. So they're just going to stick by their evidence because that's their job. And no progress will be made, and nothing will be accomplished. And that is exactly what's transpiring in conversations where we try to engage as if it's a debate.
Yeah, and I think that again we have this sort of idea that we're arguing or debating in a context and on a landscape that is equal, where everybody's going to be you mentioned open minded and listen to it. And we know we've known this for all human history, but it's becoming increasingly apparent during the social media age. As polarization and algorithms manipulate us, that you're not. We're working a lot in smart politics just to get us back to the point where you might be to feel like you're two reasonable people sitting at a table having a reasonable debate about issues. That'd be wonderful if we could actually do that in an imaginary, perfect world. But the fact is, you're swimming upstream against a lot of emotions and feelings, which I know you're going to get to next.
Yeah. But there is one place where you might be able to get away just going to presenting your thesis and evidence and drawing a conclusion. And that's when the other person doesn't have a prior opinion on a subject.
Mhm.
So, um, and then it's not really a debate. You're making your case, and they don't have any reason to be defensive because um, they they have no position to protect. So if you go to someone and say, "Hey, uh, I have this proposition. I'm in favor of it. Have you heard anything about it?" They're like, "No." And you say, "Well, let me tell you a little bit about it. I think you should vote pro." Um, and then you make your case. They're much more likely to hear you out and say, "Yeah, I'm going to vote in favor of that. That sounds like the right position." And and because that kind of situation works, I think that sometimes gives us the false impression that that's always how it should work. And
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the difference between someone coming up to you and saying, "Hey, I know you like music. I like music too. Could you recommend some music to me?" They're asking you to share something, or they're asking you for information, as opposed to them saying, "I love heavy metal. You like country. Let's fight." Um, so
Yeah, yeah,
so yeah, if someone is coming to you and they're asking you questions, they're saying, "Hey, I don't understand what's going on here in this particular issue. Could you talk to me about it?" That's wonderful. That's, a chance to share and even then you want to share in a way that is not that's not going to make them defensive. But
right.
that's unlikely in our environment these days. More often, people come into the conversation saying, I believe this. Now, what are you going to do
And
about it?
you're wrong.
Yeah.
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 So why do I think this really gets to the heart of a lot of folks come in there. Why do folks reject facts and evidence? I've got these articles. I've got this. I've seen these things on MS Now or on eight. I've seen things in the New York Times or in the Wall Street, Washington Post. I know the facts about, say, the reflecting pool. I know what happened there.
Yeah.
Let me share this with you and present these facts and give you these articles and this evidence, and then you will see the light. So why
Yeah.
doesn't that work?
Yeah. So, one thing to keep in mind is what we talked about last time, which is people are defensive, right? So there's a little bit of ego involved. If I don't want to hear that my prior position was wrong, there's a little bit of group identity involved, which is I don't want to hear that my group is wrong because I'm very dependent on my group. There's a little bit of uh, protecting my worldview, and protecting my uh, like cognitive resources. So I'm doing that too.
Yeah.
So there are all these kind of defensive things that automatically go up.
And I always say feelings don't care about your facts.
And feelings don't care about your facts. And one of the really helpful metaphors for thinking about all of this comes from Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Righteous Mind, which I will say is The Righteous Mind is one of those books that I recommend to everybody. Like, it's one of the few books where I say, if like that is a book worth getting about political psychology. There are very few out there that I say, yes, that is worth having and reading. And he has this wonderful metaphor to help us understand this tendency of the mind to reject facts. And he says that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant, and the rider is um, is the rational, logical part of the mind. The elephant represents the emotional part of the mind. It's like the gut, instinctive, just what you feel part, right? And the writer is very conscious, very aware, very able linguistically, very able. Um, the elephant is very groupish, very attuned with identity and the herd. Um, and the writer, we tend to think, is in charge. But when you think about it, the elephant, given its size, actually has a lot more power in this relationship. So the writer, it it may want the elephant to do something, but the reality is, if the elephant wants to go somewhere, the rider has no choice but to go with it. Okay. Um, and this is really how our mind is working. That the elephant, the emotional elephant, is in charge, with the rider kind of going along for a ride. The logical elephant is going along for the ride. Now, does that mean that reason doesn't matter or logic doesn't matter? Absolutely not. Logic and reason get to work at the margins. And logic and reason can work to kind of gently encourage the elephant to behave in different ways. And the writer can communicate with other writers around it, and they can kind of coordinate, and they can soothe each other's elephants, right? Another thing they can do is, and this is really important, is that the writer is super adept at rationalizing anything the elephant does. And it often does this after the fact. So the elephant may reject the elephants don't care about facts, right? So it's going to continue on its path. And then the writer is going to figure out why those facts were rejected and explain it away. Um, in however whatever means it can come up with, whatever
Yeah,
clever means it can come up with to do that.
it's the Pee Wee Herman "I meant to do that." The elephant
Yeah,
charges
exactly,
ahead,
exactly.
tramples a gate, and you're like, "Well, okay, I meant to do that." And when we think of like, oh, and this happens, we see this play out all the time with people who are still supporting everything Donald Trump does.
Right.
And they will say, "Okay, Trump, I want Trump to do this," and he does the opposite. And within 10 minutes, they've come up with a way of saying, "Well, I wanted him to do that opposite thing too. That's what I really wanted,"
Yeah, yeah.
We saw that with immigration, we saw that with Iran, we saw this with the
Eh,
reflecting pool, Yeah.
exactly.
And so one thing that I kinda left out of my first question was this really, we all think, "Oh, I'm people are smart," really smart people want facts. They want evidence. Really smart people wouldn't fall for, these lies or this con job or this rationalization. But that's exactly the opposite, right?
It's the exact opposite. Like, the more educated a person is, the, faster thinking someone is, the quicker on their feet. Actually, the more adept their writer is at rationalizing the actions of the elephant. So, it is harder to persuade someone, rationally, uh, uh, if they're, when they are smart.
Yeah. They've got sharper tools
Right.
to
And
do it, handle it.
there's some really fascinating research on this. For example, they've done this with both the Democrats and Republicans. So this is not a partisan thing. They've looked at people with really good math skills and people with less good math skills. Um, and they've shown them policy proposals and had them like calculate out, uh, like make calculations about that are contrary to their partisan stances. And suddenly the people who are good at math um make get worse at math when in it like they make um they get significantly worse at math than the other people. In order to align themselves with their partisan position,
Yeah.
which is
And we
really
see this.
fascinating.
I won't go into my whole little list, but there's a lot of folks of the past 20 years who started out on the left who, we maybe writers and pundits who we followed and thought, who have, in the past 10 years have turned completely to the right and gone really far, what we feel like is really far down the right wing. I could list names, but that's part of it is they have really sharply attuned critical thinking skills, and they've just used those critical thinking skills to rationalize or justify a particular point, and it's led them, you know, off the path in ways that were sometimes shocking. You know, if you ever want, a check of it, go to your bookshelf and look at books that you loved 5, 10 years ago and what the authors are up to now, and you're like, oh wow, So again, I won't name names, but they pop up all the time in my experience.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about what actually work? We've talked a lot about the defensiveness. We talked about why really smart people are
Yeah.
convince
Well,
themselves.
so
Mm.
let me just first say, so what that metaphor shows us is that we have to pay a lot more attention to the elephant than to the rider. That a lot of us get really distracted by the writer, where when the power really rests with the elephant. Um, and so that's a lot of what smart politics is about. And so what the research shows is that there are really two routes to two primary routes to persuasion. Um, One is via trust, and that runs directly through the elephant. If the elephant trusts you, it's going to follow you. It's going to basically do what you want it to do. And this is what we understand. We all understand, like from intuitively, and because it permeates our lives through marketing and advertising, right? So somebody we like and trust hawks a project or a product, and suddenly everyone wants it. So that an entire industry is built upon that pathway of persuasion. In politics, what that looks like is primarily your political party nominates a person for public office, and you vote for them. Now, a lot of us feel like, well, I don't vote for them just because my political party nominates them. And that may be true. But for most people, most of the time, the decision about who they're going to vote for is decided by who their party nominates. And that's because they trust their political party more than they um, trust themselves, or more than they have the time and energy to go out and collect that information
And
themselves.
and not even so much that they trust their political party, they just have that's their identity, that's their political identity. My mom
And
voted for Trump because she was a Republican, and then she backtracks to come up with the reasons why that's okay, and we do the same thing. You could talk to a lot of folks who say with, Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris, I voted for them because they were the candidate and they were opposed to Trump. Um, and maybe we do or do not have 100% alignment on all the issues with them, or maybe we overlooked flaws, but we voted for our identity. We voted for our identity.
yeah, yeah. And that I think is a little tricky to sort out, um, trust and identity there. I have to think about that a little bit. Like, um, how much are we using it as a cue
Mhm,
versus how much are we doing it as something we're doing as a support for our team?
mhm.
Like, there's almost uh, one is one is something you do for your group. One is something your group is almost doing for you, right?
Okay.
Um, yeah, but they're probably both going on simultaneously. So yeah,
So these are all examples of fast
yeah,
trust.
right,
Just knee
and
what we would call knee jerk trust or
right, and
automatic.
I think this is really helpful for understanding um those changes that I think you were referencing earlier, that MAGA folks make, where they turn on a dime, right?
Mm,
Um, so for the longest time, we weren't MAGA was very anti-war, and for a lot, and then Iran, or then Trump decides to attack Venezuela, and then Trump attacks Iran. And yes, there were some people who broke with Trump, but the vast majority stayed with him, and that was because of trust, right? So they follow him no matter what he does because they trust him. Um, So that is that fast path. They don't have to analyze it. They don't
Yeah.
have to think about it. It just automatically happens. Um, because they inherently trust whatever he does.
Yeah, and I always feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, that I always say, there is like almost a real world, real time process to this. If something happens, suddenly, or Trump makes an announcement that we know goes against, a lot of his followers' stated, beliefs, you've got to talk to them right then because within 12, 24 hours, they're a little bit lost in that moment. They're a little bit shook. They're like, wait, that's not what I voted for. That's not what I thought Trump was about. Within 24 hours, either the administration or Fox News will give them talking points to help them rationalize
Mhm.
the difference. And the basic thing we keep repeating ad nauseum is most people are just happy to take those talking points. It's like, I am not a car mechanic. I don't want to mess around in my car. I want to drop it off with somebody else who will fix my car and give it back to me 3 hours later.
Yeah,
Um, and I can get on with the rest of my day. And so the vast majority of folks we're talking to are not like us. They're not going to sit and tinker around in their car or figure out the political, or ethical ramifications of everything. They're like, please, somebody just tell me what I should be doing, and so I can get on with it.
right.
And Fox News or propaganda or the White House are more than happy to give them those talking points within a few hours of a major, cognitive disruption.
Right. And this kind of brings me to the next point I want to make, which is um a lot of us are who are much more politically engaged and kind of politically obsessed are looked down on this tendency of other people. And I think it's really important to understand that the average person, the average American, does not have um, the inclination or the resources to be as politically engaged as we are. Most people have far less time, less energy. They are lower information. They have less information. Um, they don't. It is not something that is inherently interesting to them to learn about politics. They are maybe were not. They don't. They weren't socialized in a political environment, so they don't know how to navigate it at all. Like it feels like a foreign. Um, they don't even know how to go about informing themselves
Mhm.
politically or to engage politically. Um, and so if you are in that situation, it actually makes perfect sense to outsource your voting decision, or your political beliefs to others who you trust, whether that be a family member or a church or, a community or, political party, whatever it is. Because if you trust them, you have for some reason you think they will make a better decision than you. And let's face it, that's what unions and political parties have are all about, is helping people make better decisions. And I think it's really important that we don't look down on this particular method of political decision making. It's fundamental for a huge swath of the American public on both the right and the left.
Yeah, and I've always been I thought I was a fairly informed, liberal, and even when I'm in Chicago and before the election, we get those lists that come out from law groups saying, "Here's the judges you should vote for. Here's how we rank these judges." I don't know who these judges are except for the ones who are friends, which happens sometimes. But So yeah, we take those shortcuts too. We say, okay, please, yeah, I know the politicians I'm going to vote for, but I don't know anything about these judges. And they give you a list, and we say, okay, well, I trust X and X law association, so I'm going to follow their recommendations. So are we getting into the slow reason thinking part of this, or
Yeah, I think we're ready now. So that I think we've covered the fast. The fast is pretty easy to understand, right?
yeah, yeah. So yeah,
All right. So that was the first route to persuasion. The second route to persuasion is not fast. It's surprisingly slow. And this is the route that most of us are trying to take when we go through debate. Um, it is a thinking, reasoning, logical path where we collect information, we deliberate about the information, we try to integrate it with what we already know. We weigh advantages or disadvantages, and we come to some kind of new decision or a new understanding about how things are.
okay.
Um, yeah. And, and in the political realm, the a very simple version of this is, um, you go out, there's a proposition on the ballot. So, and you don't know anything about it. You go out, you gather information, you read arguments for and against. Maybe you talk to a friend or two, see what they're thinking about doing. Um, and based on that, you decide, okay, I think this is a good idea, and I'm going to vote for it. That is um, that is a slow reasoning thinking. You are not doing it on the basis of trust. You are doing it on the basis of evidence and argumentation, um, and logic to the best of your ability. This is not just slow; it is very energy intensive. It demands attention, it demands cognition, um, and and arguably, there is very little payoff. Um, so and what I mean by that is there are political scientists are out there who argue that this is a very irrational behavior.
The
Like, there
slow
are
reason. Yeah,
political scientists who argue the people who do this are behaving totally irrationally.
people who do the research and
Yeah,
and find
because
the evidence.
because
Okay.
it's so unlikely that your vote is actually going to matter that it's, like, just, a waste of your time. But to be fair, those political scientists also pretty much argue that voting is probably irrational. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So you
Um,
took us down a rabbit hole of the kind of
yeah,
extreme
I'm
thinking,
just
some
saying.
outlier here.
Anyway, but,
But
so
so yeah, you got the fast, you got the
but
slow. Go ahead.
and also but here's another interesting thing is that this kind of reasoning on your own is also highly error prone. We
Mhm.
in human beings do not actually do very well reasoning on our own. We make a lot of mistakes. We're not very good at researching by ourselves. We're not very good at thinking by ourselves. We're much better reasoning in groups, gathering information in groups. So something something to keep in mind.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and this, I don't wanna drag us down this rabbit hole, but that's one of the things that we see, like, with the rise of AI, especially in the past couple years, is that it's telling us things we wanna hear, and it's making mistakes because it's trying to please us. And that's what we're just using AI as an extension of our own mind in that case. We would normally come up with those error-prone rationalizations ourselves, but now we've got AI to do it for us, and it's like, "Oh, no, you're right, you're absolutely right. Here's why." So yeah, yeah, we make mistakes, and then as we said earlier about the smart people, we drive ourselves deeper into those mistakes because we're good at rationalizing. the errors.
So, okay. So these are kind of idealized paths. These are pure basic paths. They aren't the only ways that persuasion happens. And um and if these were the only paths, we couldn't explain a lot of what actually happens in persuasion. So the path I want you, now that you understand these two paths, what I really want you to think about is what I consider the most important path,
A
which
third.
is the way persuasion most often happens is through a trust path, and then a reasoning and thinking path, and then persuasion. So it's really a two-step process. It's not where you have just one of these kind of isolated by itself.
Hmm.
Um, and that's really important because that's really what we're doing in smart politics. We are not just, I know we talk a lot about trust. Trust is extremely important in smart politics, but we are not just asking people um, to like trust us and then agree with us. Like that is like uh, absolutely contrary to what we want to have happen because we very one of our most important values is autonomy. We want people to figure out for themselves what they think and believe about politics. What we are encouraging them to do is to really rethink their beliefs in light of their values, in light of a more thorough understanding of the facts. Um, and we want to give them room to do that, a space to do that. Um, so we are not trying to just build a trust path by which our beliefs are imposed upon them. Um, did you want to say something, Locke? You kind of
No,
looked like you. No.
no, no, no.
Okay. Okay. So that's really important. So what we do with trust, and maybe this is a good time to introduce the trust pyramid.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Let's see if I
just
can
as a
do that.
reminder, we talked about that in our last episode. So the first step really in any conversation in smart politics is we try to establish trust with the person we're talking with, because if you don't have trust in a conversation, you're not going to get anywhere. It's going to completely fall apart. And we see trust as is going through 5 levels, and you start from the bottom of this pyramid and work your way up. If, at any point in the pyramid, the lower level collapses, then everything on top of it, um, falls apart, right? So at the bottom of the pyramid is comfort. That means making people feel, safe, like they won't be judged. The second level is connection, feeling a sense of bonding, friendship, um, uh,
Things
feeling
in common, you
things in
know,
common, like, yeah, exactly. The next level is comprehension, feeling like they're seen, like you understand them, who they are in some significant way. Um, the next level is compassion, that you care about them as a person, not just about yourself or people like you. And then finally, credibility. And this is where we try to show that we at least are trying to not be biased, that we are capable of admitting when we are wrong, that we are open to learning new things, and yeah. That's the pyramid. In coming episodes, we are going maybe next episode, we're going to talk about exactly how to do those things.
Yeah, I always teach it as the pyramid is what we're trying to climb. We're trying to climb this pyramid and build these levels. And when we get to the persuasion conversation cycle, I always think of that as like the bicycle or the wheel that we use to climb the pyramid, which is more nuts and bolts conversation stuff. So, quick little programming question here. We've got technically about 10 minutes if we keep this at an hour. We've got a lot. We've got a really active chat room
Ah,
today with a
okay.
lot of questions. Do you wanna take some now, or do you wanna kind of wrap this up and then
Let's go ahead. Let's go to the questions, and then we can come back to these later. If we yeah,
okay.
we're good.
Yeah, so I apologize in advance if I skip over some of you. I'm just gonna try to, pick out some questions here that I think that, are so we're talking about debate. Hillel asks, "Isn't it a matter of disposition or training? I know some people who can in effect debate an issue in person or online with facts and reasoning without a third impartial party judge." So I think we're talking here about just what we mean by the verb debate. You were talking more about like, oh, you're in a debate club and there's a moderator, or you're in a courtroom. But there are people who debate online who don't have an impartial moderator, decider. So, that's a skill, right? That's just a
Yeah,
tactic.
I mean, ultimately, I'm not sure what he means by the word debate here. Usually, the challenge often is that debate is about winning, right? One person defeats another person, and our goal is not winning in our political conversations. We're not trying to um, prove that we are right and the other person is wrong. In our political conversations, we are trying to find often common ground and to achieve some kind of new synthesis in the areas where there is disagreement.
Mhm.
To find a way to move forward together. Um, you often what that means is identifying a problem that we both agree on and finding some way that both of us, we attack the problem together rather than going at each other.
Yeah, and I think debate in this larger context just means using an argument to make your point and win that point. That the ultimate goal is to win it over. I'm just moving very quickly here. We're gonna be kinda jumping over, try to stay focused. William asks a question that kinda gets back to a real easy one. Would you generally advise against sending articles to people who disagree with you?
Um,
Initially, yes. As a first
initially, yeah,
action,
right.
yes.
So one of the things about sending articles is um, people, 1, don't read them. 2, it makes them defensive. They're like, it's obviously it's like, firing at them over the wall. They experience it as an attack. However, there is research that shows if you ask someone ahead of time, would it be okay if I sent you an article on this topic? Would you be interested in reading about more about this? And they say yes, then go for it.
Yeah.
So then they are more likely to read it. It's just really important to get their consent before you do it, and make sure you're doing it in a way that is not making it about proving them wrong. And I would suggest in that exchange saying, if you have any articles you would like to send me, please pass them on at the same time.
Yeah. And two quick points, and we'll keep moving here. One is everybody's wired differently. And there are folks out there who prefer to have articles sent to them. What a lot of times what we talk about in smart politics as advice is, one, it's a generality about the majority of people you're going to be talking to, and two, it's corrective. We have a bad tendency to be a little bit lazy and say, well, I'm just going to send you this 20-page New Yorker article and then I'm done. You just read that, and I don't have to worry about this anymore. So part of it is just, not using it as a crutch. And then I forgot what the other part was. So I went down one rabbit hole, forgot the other one. I'll think it'll probably come to me later. But yeah, yeah, I'll move on, and it'll come back to me in like 30 seconds as soon as we move on. Just a note, this is not really a question, but Kelly has been making some really interesting points here. She says many people who changed their views did so for financial benefit. And I always address this very quickly. Yes, we live in a world now, attention economy, influencers. We see it all the time, especially on Twitter X. Folks who are financially incentivized to take whatever stance pays the bills, and you can see that on a small scale, on a social media influence. You see it on a large scale on Fox News. We
Yeah. I would
Fox
add
News does it all the time. Yeah.
I would
They
add a lot of people who changed their mind also did it after a narcissistic injury.
Right, but I'm just saying, I always tell folks, you're not talking to Sean Hannity. You're not talking to the
Right.
worst political influencer.
This is important
Um,
to know.
so yes, there are people who change their minds for political benefit, financial benefit, for power benefit. We see that in the Congress all the time. Republicans supporting Trump for just to stay in power, but that's not usually who you're talking to. You're not. Your uncle didn't change their mind for financial benefit. There might have been other reasons, maybe financial, economic reasons they changed their mind, but they're not getting paid by someone. William asked another good question. Does it follow that if you don't agree with someone that you don't really trust them? Let me read that again. Make sure I'm getting it.
Ah,
If you don't agree with, does it follow that if you don't agree with someone, that means you don't really trust them, or you don't trust them because you don't agree with them?
no. That's one of the amazing things about this, is you can fully trust someone and still disagree with someone. And that is one of the amazing things you can accomplish in one of these conversations is make someone feel really safe, climb that pyramid to the top, earn their trust completely, and still be in a place where you have some really significant disagreements and have that person. I have people all the time who say to me, this was an amazing conversation. This was the best political conversation I've had before, I've had in my life. You know, I, I can't believe that you're a progressive. Like, I thought progressives were monsters. Like, I've had them ask me for hugs. They ask for my business card so they can contact me. It is
Yeah, yeah.
there. It's clear that it changed. They trust me after we have these conversations. It's not and these are complete strangers that I meet. Yeah.
Yeah, and to get to the whole point of this today is that they felt good about those conversations, not because, probably not primarily because you presented facts or arguments that they found convincing. They felt good about those conversations because you made them feel safe and they trusted
Yeah.
you. You created a safe space for them.
Right.
So yeah, and also, William, I think your question kind of gets at what we're trying to address, which is perfect, because we tend to not our initial reaction is to not trust someone that we disagree with. What we're trying to teach folks in Smart Politics is to go a little deeper, go beyond that. We're trying to flip it around. So we're saying we all, on the left and the right, distrust people we don't agree with politically. What if we flip that and build the trust first before we get to, arguing the politics? So yes, your question kind of gets at the flip, the reversal we're trying to do here, putting the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. Um, Kelly, you've made another point. Bringing up ideas, you can pre-bunk by giving people facts before they. So people always mention pre-bunking. My quick reaction is that yes, that can work in some cases, but again, it all comes back to building that trust before you try to pre-bunk. If you try to pre-bunk someone, and I think what you're saying, Kelly, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, is if someone is a little bit babe in the woods, if they're in that little limbo place where they're floating and they've either haven't made a decision about something, or they've had their assumptions rattled or the rug pulled out from under them, then you can pre-bunk by giving them facts before they get into the propaganda. But again, it all comes after building that trust, laying those groundworks. Um, Hillel, I think we addressed one of Hillel's. I'm going to keep moving here quickly. Da, 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 da. Uh, okay, so Hillel asks, is it reciprocal? Does smart politics encourage liberals to rethink their values and to trust conservatives and their deliberations?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good answer. Yeah. That, and we won't have time to get into it today, but I want to say that longtime friend of the blog, Seth, asked online. He's not here today right now. If facts don't matter, and trust and identity is key, what's to stop the wrong side from outcompeting the right side by having better propaganda? I mean to say, building deeper trust. Moreover, it then seems dubious to think time-intensive and very skilled individual missionary work can effectively counter mass media professional liars. I think that kind of dovetails a little bit with what Hillel is asking: is that, do we encourage the other side to practice these things, or how do we deal with it when the other side uses these types of tactics to promote
Yeah.
their side?
So so this isn't I would distinguish this, I would vehemently distinguish this from propaganda. Having a
Which
conversation,
distinguish what from
what
propaganda?
we do from
Okay.
propaganda, having a conversation with
Well, of
someone,
course we would say that, right?
but one-on-one with someone, is very different from, where we don't even do most of the talking. We let the other person do the one of the things I tell people is, in a conversation, I probably do about 1/5 of the talking, and the other person does about 4/5 of the talking. So it's very hard to engage in propaganda when you are not the one doing most of the talking. Um and for me, I think what this gets to is one of the questions I get a lot, which is this some kind of manipulation? Are you, like, taking advantage of people and trying to, use trust to, get them, like, to use them for your ends? And the simple answer to that is, th the way I resolve that for myself is, am I doing anything, um, when I am engaging with people, that I wouldn't be comfortable having them do to me?
Mhm.
And as long as I am comfortable with them engaging with me in this way, then I think it's ethical. And so I am not doing anything in these conversations, and I wouldn't want you to do anything in these conversations, um, that you wouldn't feel comfortable having a right-wing Republican do in a conversation with you.
Yeah, and if someone from the opposite, from a different political side than us, whether it's to the right or to the left, is engaging in a sort of listen first, bridge building type conversation with us, that's better. That's what we want. We want a calmer, more compassionate, more focused, listening sort of approach on both sides. I think also, when the context of Hillel's question, do we encourage liberals to rethink their values and to trust conservatives, or to change our mind in a more conservative direction? I think where we get hung up on that a lot right now is because of the very particular nature of our political landscape right now, where we can look at Trump and what they're doing and what the GOP is doing to enable Trump, and see that as, as we all know, far, far away from any sort of conservative values or a rash. We are in la la land. We are in wonderland with, down the rabbit hole with some of this stuff. So yes, it's hard when you say, "Hey, could you ever be convinced of a conservative point of view?" Right now, people's minds flash to the most extreme Stephen Millery, crazy Nazi, white supremacist, fascist ideas that they're trying to push out there. But think back to 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or when I was growing up, in the 80s, where you might say, okay, tell me your thoughts about the economy and how we could have a stronger economy or a better economy or what's best. Tell me your thoughts about these social issues, and maybe I'll listen. that was a different time. We're trying to A lot of this work is trying to get us back to that calmer, more respectful, open-mindedness, as opposed to having to deal with, just the fire hose of crap that the current, I wouldn't even say conservative, that the current far right is dealing in through Trump. I don't know what I just said, but all right. So we're a little bit we're do you have okay, Hillel. We'll have to address this later. Do you see Hillel's comment? It sounds like a sweeping condemnation of Trump, MAGA, right wing, and conservatives. Sounds like you're saying that current conservatives cannot be trusted. Well,
Wait,
Trump cannot be trusted. Trump's administration cannot be trusted.
I think we need to wrap.
Yeah.
We're at the top of the hour.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the overall subject of facts not changing minds?
Mm, all I want to say to kind of wrap this up is we are not saying you can never use facts. Um, but you should never lead with facts. It really is going to get in the way of your ability to persuade. It's not going to be the quick fix you often intuitively think it's going to be. Um, Lead with trust. Once you have earned some trust, you will be able to naturally get to a place where facts can be introduced into the conversation gently. And in future conversations, we will talk about how you'll know when that moment comes, how you introduce those facts, and how you make them really effective.
Yeah. So wrapping up with the technical stuff, where are we at? Our next podcast will be Thursday, July 16th, our usual Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, how to have better political conversations. And I think we'll get a little bit into the persuasion conversation cycle. I'm trying to think of anything else. We have a webinar coming up in early August, but we have not nailed down a date yet. So I'm going to save that until we have a date nailed down. So we're going to be gone for about a week and a half. We won't be back until Thursday after this, week and a half away. So,
Yep.
um, one second, let me grab some of this stuff here. But yeah, just Hillel, to your point, I don't think there's many true conservatives left anymore who support Trump. I think most of them at one point or another became never Trumpers. So we're talking when we talk about the condemnation, we're talking about the hardcore Trump and his administration. Um, yeah, okay. Is there anything else we're forgetting?
I don't
Kind of
think
stumbled to
so,
kind of rambled to the
except
end here.
to thank everyone. Thank you
Yes, thank you.
all for being here for the Smart Politics Way live. Again, I'm Karen Tamarius. This is Locke Petersheim. And please share us with your friends. We're a brand new podcast, and I don't know how many people actually know we're here.
Yeah.
So it would be great if you could spread the word.
And to that point, I still don't understand exactly what folks see from this chat in terms of connection, but Smart Politics Way is our Substack page. It also pops up on your phone as Karen Tamaris at substack.com. So yeah, if you haven't already checked out the Smart Politics Way, we have a lot of materials as well as past podcast episodes and past articles. So thank you very much, everyone. And we will see you hopefully in about a week and a half.
All right.
All right.
Have a
Thanks.
great week.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.